Good morning. Today we look at Matthew chapter 26, verses 51 through 75. And these are some of the best known verses maybe in the Bible. I mean, because it's at the time of Jesus' arrest, the betrayal, the arrest, some of the trial, and Peter's denial, but yesterday we ended with that they came and laid hands on Jesus and took him. And this is in Matthew's gospel. It's the guard. It's the guard of the temple guards that come. It's not the Roman soldiers that come, but it's the temple guards, and they arrest him. And as we begin today, it says, suddenly one of those with Jesus stretched out his hand, drew his sword, and cut off the servant, struck the servant of the high priest, and cut off his ear. Well, the disciples had two swords with them. I mean, this was all they had. Jesus. It wasn't something that they did. They weren't bodyguards for Jesus. But they did have two swords along. And John's gospel tells us it was Peter that did this. And but Jesus tells him, "Put your sword away. I didn't come so that we're going to fight in battle." And then he says, "Don't you know I could call down 12 legions of angels?" Well, a legion in the Roman army was about 6,000 men. So 12 legions of angels, 72,000 angels. And think about the power of an angel. Way back in Exodus when God sent the angel of death, and killed all of the firstborn. I mean, this was one angel. And again, there's different places in the Old Testament where there was an angel, the angel of death that came and destroyed, thousands of lives in just a short time. So the power of one angel is enormous, much less to think of 12 or 72,000 angels, 12 legions. That's a tremendous number of heavenly hosts that would be at Jesus' command. And he says, but no, I can't do that. I'm not going to do that. Verse 54, how then would scripture be fulfilled that it must happen thus? He says, the prophecies need to be fulfilled. All of this is going to happen. And he says that, how would prophecy be fulfilled in verse 54? And then he says it again in verse 56. All this is done so that scriptures of the prophets may be fulfilled. And it's, in between those two times, it's, have you come out to arrest me as a robber during the night? I sat daily with you teaching in the temple, and why didn't you arrest me then? I mean, you think about that. I mean, here's Jesus is in the temple teaching, healing people. Of course, the religious leaders are getting more and more upset with all that Jesus has done, and we know from what the gospel writers tell us that they were plotting against Jesus of how to arrest him and everything. But here they come at night, and arrest him, under the cover of darkness, when Jesus isn't surrounded by the crowds of people. It's just the disciples that are there. In verse 57, those who laid hold of Jesus led him away to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were assembled. But Peter followed at a distance, But I guess I skipped over the end of verse 56. The disciples all forsook him and fled. And just remember, as Jesus talked to Peter about his denial, how they all said, we will never, never forget you. We will never turn away. But they all fled. And this again, fulfilling scriptures. So Jesus goes and they're trying to find false witnesses against him. Why would they look for false witnesses? In a court of law, you want to have witnesses that are telling the truth. You want to have factual information, not made up stuff. But, it said they couldn't find anything, although many came forward. But at last, two finally came and said, he said, just as quoting Jesus, I am able to destroy the temple of God and to build it again in 3 days. Kind of misquoting a little bit, but it's blasphemy there. And then they ask him finally, I put you under oath to the living God. tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. This is kind of like, put your hand on the Bible and you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. And this was what they were asking Jesus. And he says, Matthew's gospel tells us, it is as you say. He didn't say, I am the Christ, but he said, it is as you say. Basically, that's what he said, I am. Nevertheless, you're going to see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power, and they call him out for blasphemy. And they say he's deserving of death. So then begins the spitting on him and the beating. They spit on him and they beat him, and they struck him with the palms of their hand, and mocking him. Prophesy to us if you're the Christ. If you're the Christ, who hit you? Here they are in the dark, and it can't be pitch dark, but yet they're just the shame and the scorn is beginning. And then the last thing that we read today is Peter had followed, and he's in the courtyard, and it says a servant girl came. You also were with Jesus of Nazareth, and he denies it in verse 70. He went out by the gateway, and another girl saw him. Some Gospels it was the same servant girl, but another girl sees him and says to him, to those around him, this fellow was with Jesus. And again, we know that Peter denies it. And then, verse 73 later, those who stood by, around the fire where Peter was standing warming himself up, surely you are one, for your speech betrays you. They could recognize his accent. And he again denied it, and the cock crowed to fulfill what Jesus had said to Peter. And Peter went out, and it says, wept bitterly. I think about that, that Peter, for all his good intentions, fled from Jesus, although he did follow at a distance to the courtyard. He got in somehow. But he was there, and just as Jesus had told him, he denied him those 3 times. People were looking, and, we can say as much as we want, I would be faithful. But, seriously, think about, people that are persecuted for their faith. We're so fortunate to not be persecuted for our faith, to not have to, stand firm on, in an inquisition and people questioning us and demanding answers. And although there are people that say, well, why do you believe in God? Maybe not to you and to me, but there are people that ask that question, and there are people that deny the existence of God. And yet we stand firm in our faith and our trust in the fact that Jesus is the Messiah. And we proclaim that. But our lives don't always witness that completely either. We sometimes get caught up in the crowd movement and stuff that way, and that's what's happened so often here in this trial of Jesus. People getting caught up. All of these people that are false witnesses, they're looking to get a little bit of personal glory or whatever it might be, and to come and to speak against Jesus. But we hear the story of Peter, and we hear that in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. All 4 Gospels tell the story of Peter and his denial, and of the crowing of the rooster. And I remember in the movie The Passion of the Christ, as that rooster crowed the 3rd time, Jesus was on one side of the courtyard and Peter on the other, and their eyes met across the courtyard as that happened. And whether it was true that their eyes met or not, we don't know. But just as Jesus had told Peter, this is going to happen. Jesus was aware that it did happen. He knew that it did happen. And it just the hurt, the pain, the agony on both of them. For Jesus to feel this lost and abandoned, and for Peter to realize that he had denied knowing this greatest person that had ever been in his life. And so as we read these final days of Jesus' this is the night before he's crucified now. And It doesn't get any easier, no matter how many times we do it, to read through it and to live through this horrible story of the end of Jesus' life. But we remember that Jesus said twice in verse 54 and verse 56, how could the scriptures be fulfilled if I don't go through with my Father's will? And for Jesus to be able to complete the journey to the cross and through the cross, had to take a tremendous amount of faith and trust in his Father God. And we should have that same faith and trust. And we get that. We are led to that faith by the actions of Jesus and by his faithfulness to his Father God.